Hey, give me a time starts now, y'all.
Time starts now. Alright, time starts now.
I negate today's resolution. For my framework, I have observation 1. First of all, just laws use or threaten force against citizens who, when those citizens violate the rights of their fellows. Remember, Judge, this case is going to be directly responsive to my opponent's case, and so I'm going to relate each of these on-case responses as well. So I want you to note here their value of morality and their value criterion to reject ontological violence. I am, as my part of my framework, rejecting the violation of rights, and I challenge my opponent to distinguish between, to explain to me why rejecting ontological violence is preferable to rejecting the violation of rights. And also I challenge my opponent to express exactly how it is they're going to prevent the violation of rights while simultaneously violating property rights of every single gun owner in America. Observation 2. A free society is predicated on the fundamental equality of each individual regardless of social status before the law. My value is justice. Value criterion is respect for property rights. Framework 1. Property rights are how we know what the word fair means. Fairness itself supervenes upon property rights. Fairness is predicated upon property rights. Kinsella 2014E. The reason property rights are more fundamental than and the concept upon which aggression depends is that the only reason that there is a need for property rights is the possibility of conflict, and this arises only because we live in a world of scarce/rival resources. As Mises explains, humans act which means to employ certain scarce means to achieve certain chosen ends. Framework 2. Property rights are the only means to determine justice. Kinsella A. As an example, if I hit you, it is aggression because you own your body. If I take an apple from you, it is aggression only if you own that apple. If it is my apple and I'm retrieving it from a thief, the act of force used to take it back is not aggression. We can determine whether a given apparent border crossing is invasion or theft or trespass or aggression unless we first identify who the owner of the contested resource is. Subpoint 1. Banning private ownership means using force to take. Contention 1. Affirming means voting in favor of enslaving one class of citizens. Kinsella 2014B. People fight only over scarce resources. Disagreement over religion may be the reason for the fight, but the fight is always conducted with physical force mediated by causal means, by e.g. weapons, to physically control other people's bodies or owned resources. For example, A may tell B to change A's religion or face death. The fight here is over who gets to control B's body. When a state threatens to jail people participating in drug laws, the state is asserting an ownership claim over the citizen's body. Contention 1A. My opponent advocates for the armed assault and caging of fellow citizens. The burden is entirely on her to justify this appalling disregard for the equal rights of her fellows. Note here, Judge, that this directly impacts the value of morality that my opponent presents. It directly impacts the value criterion of ontological violence, how it is that one can engage in can avoid or reduce ontological violence by assaulting and caging their fellow citizens is beyond me, and I challenge my opponent to explain that. Again, also note that Nag starts, it says that if we have an ethical theory that begins with a position of inequality, then if it condones unequal outcomes, then we can't possibly embrace it. However, note the way that my framework and initial parts of my case here refute that directly. The burden is on him to justify the appalling disregard for equal rights, not upon the rights framework to justify unequal outcomes. Remember, there is no possible way to determine to have a single ethical theory produce meaningful outcomes without explicitly eliminating free will from the equation. If we want people to be able to make their own choices and to be able to make bad choices, which is what it means to be able to make choices, then we have to absolutely prioritize rights over quote-unquote ontological violence. Now, let's go on to the next part of this case. We've got Contention 2. To argue in favor of violence in response to that which is not aggression is to argue in favor of aggression. Kinsella 2014C. What this all means is that in the eyes of libertarians, anyone who argues for the state is arguing for aggression and therefore for injustice. One can favor the state, but he cannot justify it. It is easier to commit murder than to justify it. Likewise, as we libertarians see it, any claim in favor of a law that prohibits or violent action in response to any action that is not itself aggression is itself unjust and aggression. In other words, force may legitimately be used only in response to aggression. If it is leveled against someone for any other reason, it is unjust aggression itself. So my opponent then has the burden to explain how it is that their advocacy for aggression, which is definitely what this violation of property rights is, how it is that that somehow is worse than quote-unquote marginalization. They attempted to link marginalization directly to oppression. However, the failure here is they cannot establish who these dominant elites are that they're talking about. They cannot establish who the dominant group is and who the non-dominant group is. They cannot establish any pattern of subjugation that is widespread enough to justify a wholesale elimination of property rights for every human being in America, regardless of whether they're associated with this so-called marginalization or oppression or not. She does not address, and in her case, in no way, shape, or form, manages to wrestle with the enormous bear that's in the room for her, which is namely that this involves removing handguns from the oppressed as well, not just the oppressors, right? So if you are a member of an oppressed group and you want to protect yourself, you are having that means to do so removed from you by force. How is that helpful to an oppressed person? I do not know. Neither does my opponent, and that's why she's going to lose this round. Next, let's go on to contention 3. My opponent is not advocating for the diminishment of gun violence. She is advocating for systemizing and institutionalizing it such that one class of person may commit such violence upon another without any repercussions. That is what it means to pass a law that bans something that is a piece of property, an object. It is banned for you to possess this object is to say, I am now legitimized in committing violence against you if I'm a police officer. And yet, here we see in fact in 2012, police domestic violence is nearly twice the average rate. LEOs are the least qualified to possess handguns. Back in 2012, law enforcement officers beat their wives or girlfriends nearly double the rate of the rest of the population. Trying to control that is not only difficult for the victim, but potentially deadly. Experts say the trouble lies in the very nature of police work. One of the hallmarks of a good cop is to radiate authority and control. When that misuse happens, it's hard to report because the victim has to go up against a man and his agency. The San Francisco sheriff charged with Friday with 3 misdemeanor counts connected with accusations that he abused his wife and knew the badge. But he graduated from the City Police Academy in 1996 and spent 9 years as an armed investigator for the district attorney's office. These people who are engaged in criminal justice system on the prosecutorial law enforcement side are wicked, wicked people who are engaged in systematic violence against their own family members. And they have no moral accountability. They don't engage in any sort of ethical processing of their own behavior to evaluate it in terms of whether or not it makes them good or bad people, whether or not they adhere to any sort of fundamental value at all. And so next, let's talk about this, the reality that says in order to win this round, I must account for the simple reality that all the solvency, she claims, is contingent upon our legitimizing the murder and imprisonment of millions of innocent people. If she thinks that is more just, is that better upholds the value of morality, then she's insane, and I hope, Judge, you were able to recognize this. Last thing I have to say is her slow violence stuff is bullshit. That's time. That's true. So I'm toast, basically. I didn't get to the CP. And what happened is I wasted 45 seconds at the beginning getting around to getting into business. So I did as well as I could, having not had practiced it or thought about it much ahead of time. But, yeah.
This is going to be hard.
That's what I want you to do, Courtney.